Hi dear friends, welcome to the CSS Learners Academy. Today I am going to talk about a very important topic, and it might be difficult for many aspirants to grasp the actual the details of this topic because of the complicated terminologies. Yes, I am going to talk about the economy of Pakistan. Economy is basically it is not very difficult, but the basic problem is regarding the understanding of the terminologies that are being used. And today I will try to make these terminologies very easy and comprehensive for you. Once you get to know about the meaning of the terminologies, it is very easy to imply these terminologies and to find out really what is happening. Now, you must have heard several times in the news that Pakistan economy is getting better. The economy was crippling at a stage, but now some reforms policies have been taken by the government, and the foreign direct investment in the shape of CPEC is also helping us. But on the other hand, you must be hearing that CPEC is a debt trap and it will ultimately dry out the economy of Pakistan, and it is going to be a burden on our economy. Secondly, you must be hearing about the implications of the IMF program, the current IMF program, which is the 12th program in the history of Pakistan. We have started taking the loans somewhat in the late 80s, and then the circle continued until this moment. But the PTI, the government of PTI, was reluctant to go to IMF. Why the government was reluctant and why it finally went to the IMF and applied for the debt that we are currently facing? You can say the massive restrictions are aligned with this IMF program. So what is the program? What are the implications? How Pakistan is going to manage that? What are the macroeconomic factors? What are the microeconomic factors? I will try to define all these terms in a manner that might be easily understandable for you. Obviously, we don't have enough time for this lecture. I am going to convene this lecture in the next 30 minutes, and if you have any further questions, I am available at all the provided media links below. You can contact me at any time, and I will always be happy to help. Now, let us consider the situation of the year 2018. 2018 is the year when elections were held, and Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf came out as the winner of the elections. Before winning the election, PTI was in the opposition and largely related to the province of KP, as they were able to formulate their own government in the elections of 2013. But what was happening in the federation? What was the actual condition of economy of Pakistan? Why Imran Khan always stated that we are not going to go to IMF, and he talked ill about the policymakers or who advocated for going to IMF. But now the same Imran Khan, when he was in the government, he had no other option but to finally approach IMF. So what was the reason behind that? Number one is that in the year 2018, America halted the aid that they were giving to Pakistan. You must have be aware of the issues that arose in the year 2017 when President Donald Trump announced his discontent with Pakistan, that Pakistan is not helping United States as it was meant to be. It was nothing new for Pakistan. When Americans wanted to press Pakistan or to push Pakistan a little further, they always said that we are giving you money and you are doing nothing. And as a result, Pakistan would always go and they will publish reports that this is our contribution to your cause inside Afghanistan. Now, why the year 2017 was so important that Americans did that? Because in the year 2017, the Americans initiated a trade war against China. China was becoming, a superpower. It still is, and Pakistan was the base for the progress of China because of CPEC. So in the year 2017, we saw the aggressive policies of United States being taken against China. So the pressure on Pakistan was something which had to happen. It happened in the year 2017, and then ultimately the aid was stopped. Now, I am not saying that Pakistan was depending on that aid, but it was a part of the overall economic structure of Pakistan, it definitely adversely affected our economy. The second important factor was the placement of Pakistan on the grey list of FATF, Financial Action Task Force, which was which is basically entitled to keep a check on the money laundering between several countries. So in the year 2017, the process 17 and 18, the process of FATF to put Pakistan on the grey list started. Whether Pakistan is on the grey list or not, it affects the overall trade relationships of the country with other countries, and that is what happened with Pakistan. Number third was the financial policies of the previous governments. There were some gross errors in the policy making, especially the economic policy making, that adversely affected the economy. We will study these policies related with the topics that I have planned to discuss today. And the fourth important impact was the Ricco-Dick mountain case. The Ricco-Dick case, which initiated in 2012, it was a joint venture of the two firms of Australia and Canada, the Tithian Copper. They started a negotiations process with the government of Balochistan, and later on some issues arose, and now finally went to the Institute of Settlement of Dispute, which works under the World Bank, and they imposed a penalty of almost $6 billion on Pakistan. Now this amount, $6 billion penalty, this amount is equivalent to the loan that we had applied and got from the IMF. So you can see the management, or you can see the balance or the comparison between these two that we had to pass through, and you can also calculate the impact that it had on the economy of Pakistan. Although the government is currently trying to waive off that penalty, but obviously it had an impact. Then there were some important achievements of the year 2018, like the European Parliament granted the GSP plus status to Pakistan. It means that now the exports of Pakistan were able to be exported to the European countries with less tariffs and duties. Now, when the PTI took office in August 2018, what were the policies that they made to help economy to come back on its own? Now, what were the overall statistics? As I have talked right now, that the current account was in deficit, the circular debt was rising, and the overall structure of economy was like it is going to collapse, because in the year 2019 we had to pay the loans up to the year 2019, and they were amounted to $10 billion. Now obviously our economy did not have this capacity to pay back the loans in a period of 1 year. Now, what were the policies that PTI made when they took up the office? The first step in this effort was the creation of an economic advisory council by the Prime Minister Imran Khan. The economic advisory councils not only included the ministers related to the government, but also the individuals from business community. This advisory council was created to give advice on the economic and financial policies of the country, both fiscal and monetary policies, and the things related to the business community. The emphasis of the government of Imran Khan always remained on how to decrease imports and how to increase exports. Here I have used a term current account. Now, first of all, I would like to explain what is current account. Current account is basically a type of account which records the imports and exports of the country. Here we use the word the value of imports and exports. Why? Because when we are dealing with other countries, it means that we have to have some type of a common instrument. At that common instrument nowadays with respect to Pakistan is US dollars. Now the value of the product is calculated in accordance with the value of US dollars. If Pakistan is producing, if Pakistan is producing wheat and we are going to export the wheat, it will be calculated in accordance with the price of US dollar. Now, according to that instrument, we have to deal in imports and exports. So current account is an account which records the value of imports and exports. If the imports of a country are higher than exports, it means that current account it is in deficit. Why? Because we are earning an amount by exporting the products. If I am going to sell something, I will be earning. So Pakistan is earning the foreign currencies when we are exporting the products, but when we are importing, we have to pay from that reserve. Now it means that if we are importing more and exporting less, then our foreign reserves are continuously declining because we are paying from the foreign reserves. Now if imports and exports of a country are balanced, it means that current account is in balance. And when the exports of country are higher and the imports are lesser, it means that current account is in surplus. Now you must have heard the reports that the current account of Pakistan is now in surplus. We have dealt with the deficit. How we did that? Did we increase our exports in such a minimum time period? No. So it means that there are some other parameters and we can control the current account by that parameters. Now I will explain these parameters. So how to control current account deficit? Number one option is the devaluation of your currency. Now how it helps in controlling the current account deficit? For example, the Pakistani rupee in comparison to the US dollar stands as rupees 100 ratio $1. It means that $1 is equivalent to 100 rupees inside Pakistan. Now the currency has been devalued and now $1 is equivalent to 200 rupees inside Pakistan. What is the meaning of that? It means that the product that was being produced at 100 rupees previously, we can produce two things because their cost would be 200 rupees. But because that 200 rupees is now equivalent to that $1, it means that in the same currency we are producing more. We are able to produce more goods. When we are producing more, we can export these products at the same price. I mean, producing more products and exporting them. Secondly, it has a negative impacts on imports because what we were importing at a price of 100 rupees previously now costs us 200 rupees because of the devaluation of currency. Actually or physically or practically, we have not increased our exports, we have not decreased our imports because of the product, but because of the value of money. Obviously imports are decreased because things are getting expensive and people cannot afford that. This is the first method. The second factor is to reduce the domestic consumption. How can we reduce the domestic consumption? How can we manipulate the people toward saving more and more money and not to invest anywhere? Is the method of higher taxes. When the taxes are higher, it means that now inflation will rise. It is the negative impact, but the positive thing is that there will be less imports. And the third factor is the supply side policies. Now what are the demand side policies and supply side policies? That the demand side policy means that the demand is higher and keeping in view the demand, we have to produce goods. But the supply side policy means that we have to supply and to create the demand of a certain product. Now the supply side policy means that one industry is producing laptops and we allow the license to another factory to produce the laptop. Now these two IT industries are producing the laptops and they are in a competition. It means that we have more potential for exports. The huge competition will allow them to produce more and to export these products. But then it has another adverse effect on the economy because here we were saying earlier that the high taxes will result in the reduction of current account deficit, and if we tax the exporters, it means that there is no benefit for engaging them in a competition. So that is a kind of cycle which repeats itself, and that is the reason we have to use a balanced approach towards everything inside economy. When we are studying economy, you cannot say that this parameter, if we are only heading towards this parameter, it will result in something positive for the overall economic procedures. No, it will have a negative effect, and a famous idiom that excess of everything is bad, it is best suited when you are studying economy. So here we have discussed the concept of current account, and when you read about the current account deficit in relation to the Pakistan economy, now you will understand that it means that Pakistan is importing more and exporting less, and certainly we were having a deficit. Now here is a report of State Bank of Pakistan, and here I will further talk about the policies of the previous government that I was talking about. Now here you can see that from July 2017 to January 2017, the current account was a kind of, in a balanced shape. Then again from January 2018 to July 2018, because it was the last 6 months of the government and they were to hand over the government to any other party, which was PTI, according to most of the analysts. So what happened in these 6 months is that the current account deficit plunged from $4,560 million to $6,308 million. It means that we made contracts to import more and more, whereas we were exporting less. So it resulted in a continuous decline of the current account deficit. No, not a decline in current account deficit, but an expanding current account deficit. Next thing you see that the government was formulated and they made some policies to control the current account deficit. So you can see a sharp change from July 2018 to January 2019, and then continuously you will see a kind of up and down status, ultimately reaching at $282 million as of July 2020. So it means that these policies, the one we were talking about earlier, these policies were formulated and it helped in controlling the current account deficit. Current account deficit is basically a macroeconomic factor. Now there are two terms being used here. Number one is the macroeconomic and number second is the microeconomic. The macroeconomics, macro mean a massive level or a greater level, whereas micro mean at a smaller level. So macroeconomic policy means a kind of policy which affects the whole economy of a country, like trade, like current account, like fiscal policy and monetary policy. These all are the macroeconomic factors, and the microeconomic factors are the one which will which will affect an individual business or a common man, related to SMEs, small or medium enterprises, small businesses, a shopkeeper. All these things, they are the microeconomic factors. So when we talk about Pakistan, the macroeconomic, you must have heard a term, macroeconomic adjustments. What is this macroeconomic adjustment? It means adjustment of the economy on the whole scale. It will adversely affect the microeconomic factors, as we have seen right now, but the macroeconomic adjustments are the long-term adjustments, and although they create some kind of difficulties for the people for a certain time period, but ultimately they will streamline the overall economy, and that is what the government is doing right now. So the first thing that we have discussed today is related to the current account or the balance of payment, and when it is surplus, when it is in deficit, and when it is balanced. The next thing we will study is the debt payment. How much debt is accumulated by the previous governments, by the current government, how much is the total debt of Pakistan, how much debt we have to repay in the coming years. Now we will study these things. First of all, the important thing about debt to understand is that debt is the amount which we owe and is to be repaid to the financial institutions or to the countries along with interest. That is the simple definition of debt. Now there are different kinds of debt, like you must have heard a term about the public debt. A public debt is a debt owned by the government through State Bank of Pakistan, to the foreign agencies, to the institutes or the countries. The debt owed or which is a liability of the government of Pakistan is known as the public debt. And then there is a circular debt, which we will study as the next point. So now, how much debt Pakistan owes and how much debt we have to pay. So the total debt that has to be paid by Pakistan is $97 billion. According to a statement given by the advisor to the Prime Minister on Finance, Abdul Hafiz Sheikh, Pakistan has to pay $97 billion. So what were the options for Pakistan? First of all, Prime Minister Imran Khan tried to seek help from the friendly countries, and he was very successful in that, because in total Pakistan was able to get an amount of $9 billion. Now, along with this total debt, the problem that faced by the current government was that a certain amount of the total debt was to be repaid until the year of 2019. When they were in the office in August 2018, they had to pay back an amount of $10 billion in the next year, 2019. Now, how to manage that when you have a crippling economy, you do not have any sources of income, you are paying more, your fiscal policy is also in deficit. How fiscal policy ends up in a deficit or a surplus? That the fiscal policy deals with the income and expenditures of a country. A country is earning through the taxes, it is or public sector franchise, public sector enterprises. It is the amount that is coming into the account of the country, and it is known as income of the country. Whereas the amount that we are paying is the expenditure. Now, Pakistan is earning through the taxes mainly, and secondly through the public sector enterprises. This is our income, and our expenditure is paying the subsidies. Now, the problem with our fiscal policy remained that we allowed the subsidies on several products and goods. Now, there is a certain formula. What is a subsidy and what is a tax? The tax is to be applied on the luxuries of life, whereas subsidy is to be given on the basics of life. Now, what was the wrong thing in the previous policies of the previous government was to subsidize even the luxuries of life, like traveling in metro is subsidized. Now, it is always a burden on the government, because the only earning source of the government is taxes. And if you are subsidizing more and earning less, it will ultimately result in your fiscal policy being in a deficit. So that was the deficit, the public deficit, the fiscal policy deficit that the government was facing in the year 2018. Secondly, the international pressure, as we have talked about the American aid and FATF. And the third important thing was the current account deficit, which we have talked in detail about import and export. And the fourth thing was the circular debt. Why circular debt is such a problem? Because it is a kind of debt which increases with the passage of time. So all these things were, which forced the Pakistani government to go to the friendly countries, and even then we were not able to control the economic collapse. We were not able to control that. Therefore, we were forced to go to IMF. From the friendly countries, as I was talking earlier, that we were able to get a loan of $9 billion. That was a kind of a breathing space for Pakistan, but we needed $12 billion more, not only to deal with the current economic crisis of the country, I mean back in 2018, but to repay the loans that we had to repay in the year 2019. Now here it is not only about economy, but about the geopolitical factors as well. As we all know that the American government tried very hard not to allow IMF to give Pakistan the required loan, and that resulted in a success for United States, because a loan of $12 billion, which was not paid to Pakistan, but an amount of $6 billion, and with very severe structural changes in our administrative structure as well as in the economic policy of Pakistan. So we applied for the loan was granted, but very strict terms were there. The government faced very kind of a disturbance among the circles of the government. Even the finance minister Asad Umar was removed from his post because he was not going to agree to many of the terms of IMF, as they were trying to screw the economy of Pakistan towards an ultimate decline, which we faced in the later years. But ultimately, Pakistan was able to came out of that economic burden that we were facing in the year 2018. And in the year 2019, Pakistan paid back a total debt of $10 billion. Number second is that we were able to control the fiscal deficit, we were able to control the current account deficit, and even current account deficit reached a surplus in December last year. So that was the achievement of this government. But dealing with the IMF is a difficult task, and now I will discuss about the implications of the IMF program. The current IMF program, the total capacity of this program is $6 billion, and it is entitled to be repaid in a period of 39 months. What is very serious about this program is that they are keeping a very strict check that any amount, a single penny, should not go to repay the Chinese loan. That is a kind of misconception that has been created deliberately, that Pakistan is taking the loan from IMF to pay back the loan to the Chinese. It is not true. Why? Because in 2015, when CPEC was signed, these all economic factors were calculated, and China has given Pakistan a much easier space, and China had asked not to pay anything in the first 6 years. It means that the repayment will start in the year 2021. And from the year 2021 to the year 2025, there is a minimum amount that can be paid by actually earning that amount from the sources inside the CPEC. As you know that many of the projects are working right now, and in this period of 6 years, this period was given to Pakistan to start earning from the projects and then to pay back the loans from the earning of the same projects. A total number of 9 economic zones, free economic zones, has been announced to be included en route CPEC from Gwadar to Kashgar. It means that with the enlarged economic activity, Pakistan will be able to earn from the projects and then to pay back the loan to the Chinese. So we don't need any other international financial institutions or any other country to give us money to pay back the Chinese loan. That is a total misconception that is being deliberately created, and I will talk about it further in the upcoming lecture on CPEC. So the IMF program and the implications of the program for Pakistan is the next topic that I am going to discuss here. Number one is that the officials on the key posts inside Pakistan should be the one approved by IMF. As we see that the current advisor to the Prime Minister, Abdul Hafiz Sheikh, or the Governor State Bank of Pakistan, Raza Bakr, these individuals are approved by the IMF. Why IMF does that? What is the meaning of having a structural changes inside the country? According to the manifesto of IMF, these structural changes are required to undertake by the countries like Pakistan because of the non-payment of debt on a specific time period. Whenever IMF give loans to a country, it happened several times in 1970s or 80s that the countries were not able to pay the loans back, and that was resultantly there was a burden on the IMF, because IMF is working on the basis of quota. Countries are paying to IMF, and then they are working and then they are paying to the other countries a specific amount of debt, and they are earning in the form of interests. So countries were not able to pay back, so they made a policy that there should be some administrative or structural changes inside the structure of a country, so that we are sure that they are going to pay back the amount. This is the narrative of IMF. what is actually happening is that none of the country who have relied on the economic loan, on the loan from IMF, we have never seen the economic growth. We have never seen the countries coming out of poverty because of the implications of these changes, which may be fruitful for a country on the temporary basis, but ultimately they result in the loss for the country. Now, the key posts, their people on the key post was the first thing. Number second is raising the taxes. Why? As I have talked earlier about the current account deficit, that the first and foremost was the macroeconomic purpose, was the macroeconomic adjustments. And macroeconomic adjustments cannot happen until the country is earning more. Therefore, expanding the tax net and accumulating more and more amount in the form of taxes was the second thing. Number third is the high tariffs on electricity and gas. Why these high tariffs are required? To control, obviously, to control the circular debt. Circular debt is the next topic that I will be explaining here. And the next point was the devaluation of money. Devaluation of money was not the direct demand of IMF. Their demand was to let the rupee free float in the market. Now, rupee has no capacity to compete with dollar or the other currencies. Therefore, the free floating of currency would have the adverse effect on the economy of Pakistan. Therefore, we did not allow the free float, but the devaluation of our currency up to a limited amount. But that limited amount itself was did have a great impact on the economy. The macroeconomic adjustments were there, but the burden of the economy was shifted to the individual, shifted to the common man. Because of the devaluation, the savings inside the banks, they were lost, and people, they took out their money from the banks, or they purchased gold and some other entities to safeguard their money, and all these things impacted our economy negatively. And the next impact is unemployment. Unemployment grew because of the structural adjustments of the IMF sponsored programs. Why? Because when our industry was not working, because of high taxes, because of high tariffs, it impacted the industries. And when industry is not working, it means that there is no production. And when there is no production, you cannot export more goods, number one. And number second is that you cannot control unemployment, because many people will be unemployed, and it happened in Pakistan. COVID-19 has already had very negative impacts on the international community. Although Pakistan was not struck by COVID-19 as some other countries, including India of the world did, but certainly it had an impact on the economy, and it maximized the unemployment even further. Another important dimension of the current IMF program is the overall geopolitical situation of this area, specifically this region. We see that a new bloc is rising in the form of China, Iran, Russia, and Pakistan. Turkey and Malaysia, Nepal may be included in this bloc, but currently these four countries are definitely in the bloc. Whereas these countries like Russia, Iran, and China, all of these are rival countries to the United States, whereas India is a rival country to Pakistan and China both. So Americans, they are relying more and more on India against the policies with China and Pakistan. This is a kind of current Cold War that obviously I would be talking about in international relations and even in current affairs. But according to this situation, the Pakistan need to be destabilized according to the United States and the allies. The destabilization of Pakistan can destabilize this new bloc formation. It will destabilize Iran, destabilize China, and even Russia. Now, for this purpose, this IMF program, the current IMF program, I often used to say that this program do not have that much worse economic implications that it have the strategic implications, because it is trying to hit the strategic base of our country, which is not going to happen, inshallah, and we will come out successful of this program. So now the last thing that I have to talk about here in today's lecture is the circular debt. Now, what is the circular debt basically? Circular debt, let me give you an example. If there is a person A, and person A takes a loan from person B, and then person B takes a loan from person C, and person C takes a loan back from person A. Now this is a kind of a circle, and this debt accumulated by each one of them is known as the circular debt. Now, who is the A, B, C inside Pakistan? A is the consumer, B is the distributor. You know that there are certain distributor companies who are distributing the electricity with different names like ISCO, Islamabad Electric Supply Company, or LESCO, Lahore Electric Supply Company, or PESCO or FESCO. All of these are the distributing companies directly related to the consumer, B. C is the generators who are generating electricity, and they are giving electricity to the distributors to distribute further to the consumers. C. D is the oil suppliers who are supplying the oil which is required for the generators to generate electricity. And the next one is the importers who are importing the oil from foreign countries, and they are giving to the suppliers. Now, what happened here is that many people, because of mismanagement in the system of collection, many people do not pay their bills, or there is incidents of theft, or any kind of disturbance in the transmission of electricity. It produces the burden on the distributor, because distributor is distributing the electricity and not getting the amount. Now, if distributor is not getting the amount that should be that was expected, it will further transfer the load to the generators, and generators will shut down the plants. Now that will resultantly that will influence the consumer, because of the load shedding and other factors. The consumer will again say that we are not going to pay the electricity bill. This is one thing. The other factor is the policy of the government that affects this circular debt. Now, how it affects, as I was talking earlier, that if the government is producing electricity at 10 rupees per unit, now they say that the consumer is not able to pay 10 rupees per unit, therefore we are going to subsidize electricity at a rate of 5 rupees per unit. It means that the electricity is being produced at 10 rupees per unit, whereas the consumer is paying 5 rupees. The remaining 5 rupees cushion is being paid or promised to be paid by the government. How government is going to pay the 5 rupees, additional 5 rupees per unit? From the taxes. And do you have the capacity to earn an extra amount from the taxes that you can pay back on the subsidy of electricity? No. So what government does is to ask for loan from the external sources and loan from the internal sources as well, which is the State Bank of Pakistan. The government asks for a loan at a certain price from State Bank of Pakistan. That loan is accumulated and being paid to the distributors, and sometimes it is not paid. When that amount is not paid, it means that now the current government has to pay that 5 rupees per unit to reach the level of 10 rupees, and additional 5 rupees unit is to be charged to pay back the loan that the previous government had taken from the State Bank of Pakistan. It means that the per unit cost, which was 5 rupees in the previous government, will now be charged at 15 rupees in the current government. Now obviously people will say that this or 10 rupees raise in per unit cost, what this government is doing. But the actual issue is, because of the wrong policies, we have accumulated so much loan on this circular debt that if we are not able to control the circular debt, anything is not going to help. The debt that we own the debt that we have from the IMF or other financial institutions or from the friendly country, all of this is going to go in vain. So this was our lecture for today. If you have any questions, you can contact me anytime on the given links. Stay blessed. Allah Hafiz.